Welcome to the On the Slate movie podcast. I'm Wesley.
I'm Jason.
And I'm Asher.
And On the Slate for today is a look back at the top performers of the summer at the box office. We're going to deep dive one of our favorite movies, Interstellar. And we're also going to give some recommendations from some movies and TV shows that we've watched lately. Yeah, let's just talk a little bit about each other, introduce each other real quick. This is our first ever podcast. Super exciting.
Whoop, whoop.
So if we're 100 podcasts in and we have 1 million subscribers, you can say that you were there if you're listening.
You can be the day ones.
The day ones, exactly.
Yeah.
You will get a treasured gift from us. No, actually, I'm not going to promise that.
I mean, we just scraped enough money just to get the equipment. So, I mean, maybe a nice thank you.
You get a treasured memory is what you get.
Yeah. Well, cool. So let's, introduce ourselves. Jason, why don't you start us off?
All right. I'm really big into movies. You might hear me call it film because I'm snobby like that. The movie we're talking about today is actually what got me into film as like art almost.
Yeah.
I saw it for the first time in theaters almost 10 years ago. And that kind of put me on the track to where I'm like, dude, this is like what it's about. Mm-hmm. And we're going to kind of get into that later. I won't take up too much time talking about it right here. And from there, I also kind of got into TV shows as well. Just anything with a camera, really. Not so much photography, though. And it also kind of introduced me to the music of films as well. You know, the scores. So kind of all of that and how it all combines. And that's kind of what I'm like really interested in. Is just how different directors and different writers come together to mix all these ideas and all these different art forms into the films we see. And, you know, just I love talking about it with my friends here next to me.
And I think that's kind of what we're trying to do, just talk about movies, you know, and hopefully people are entertained by it. Cool. Asher.
Yeah. Yeah. So I always grew up just loving movies, was really interested in the characters, and like I can remember specific movies growing up that, you know, were very impactful. And I would say probably around the middle school age realm is when I started getting into the filmmaking side of movies and like that whole world. I got my first camera on like an iPod Touch and like it was game over. You know, just started making films as a hobby. And then now I'm fortunate to continue to do that. So that's like my main profession, and it's just something that I really have a huge passion for, and that comes out in my love for movies and being able to talk about those with other people like here and being able to just dissect them. And yeah.
And that'll be a good perspective for me and Jason to have, because we consume film, but we don't like actually make it, and you've actually had that experience. So yeah, I think that's going to be really valuable for this podcast. For me, I think what inspires me most is, well, I mean, I like a lot of different genres. I don't really have a preference of like what's my favorite genre, but I'd say like what I'm really interested in is following like the movie industry as a whole, and just things like box office numbers or award season, like with, you know, starting with the Golden Globes and all the way to the Oscars. I'm just into that. I don't know. I like to see my favorite movies do well and get like rewarded for it, but also just the whole season of like who's going to win. I don't know. It's kind of like a sport in a way. It's just really interesting to me. But yeah, I'd say like the movie that really inspired me to think critically about movies or film, like Jason says, I say both, is probably 1917. I saw that in 2019. And yeah, ever since then I was like, wow, movies are like a legitimate like art form and merit, you know, deep thought about as an expression of, you know, what people are experiencing in their own lives. And I think in the case of that movie, it was like the grandfather of the director and his life experiences that were expressed through film. And yeah, I don't know. It was really impactful for me. So anyway, enough about us. Let's jump right into it. So our first segment, we're just going to talk about the latest movie industry news. And we just rounded up the summer officially at the box office. Technically, it's still summer this season, but movies, it usually runs from early May to early September in terms of what stuff comes out. And I figured for the podcast today, we could talk about just these top performers, the top 10 to 12 movies, and kind of give our thoughts, comment on them. I don't think all of us have seen all of these movies.
No, in fact, I only think I've seen 3 of the top 10.
Yeah. Of the top 12 lists that I have, I've seen like 10 of them, 9 of them, something like that. So
that's a pretty good.
And Asher, I don't know how many you've seen, but.
So I have seen, yeah, I'm going to be honest with you. I haven't seen any of them yet, to be honest.
That's amazing.
So Inside Out 2, though, my wife and I are planning on.
Which is number 1, by the way.
Yeah. We are planning on watching that most likely this weekend. Because we didn't see it when it was in theaters, but we have Disney Plus, and so now we're just waiting for it. And it came out on Disney Plus a little bit ago. So that one I am very excited to see.
Yeah.
And
I feel like
yeah,
you're probably like most moviegoers these days where they're just waiting for it to come out on streaming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, even though Inside Out actually kind of broke a lot of records.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Inside Out 2 is actually the number 1 grossing animated film of all time now.
Yeah.
Which is insane.
Yeah.
To think about. And
Especially
just
post-pandemic.
Think of all of like the animated movies that have just dominated our culture in the past. Like I think Frozen 2 held it for a while. Before that, I think Frozen was number 1. And even like Shrek 2, I mean, if you adjust for inflation, like Shrek 2 is like right up there too. So, but Inside Out 2 currently, as of yesterday, I should say, which I think there's still some theaters showing it, which is crazy because I think it came out in like June or July. And it is currently $1.6 billion,
Wow.
which is more money than actually Barbie made last year. Barbie was the top movie of 2023. So Inside Out 2 is most likely going to be, unless something crazy happens with, I don't even know, like Joker 2 maybe, like the first Joker. And we'll talk about that actually in a little bit. But the first Joker was successful. I don't think it's going to be that successful.
And the first Joker was rated R, and Deadpool and Wolverine, which is next on the list, is also rated R. And that broke records for an R-rated film in general, but also just pretty successful for any movie.
Yeah.
I don't think Joker. No offense, Joker.
Yeah. Especially, yeah. And we'll talk about the rated R effect actually here in a second because there's another movie that's number 2. But yeah, Inside Out 2, I mean, me and Jason, we saw it in theaters.
Like opening weekend.
Like opening weekend, yeah. We were just trying to like watch a movie, and that was basically the best option. And we were, I think, really surprised. I mean, we knew that the first one was really good. I don't know if you guys have seen the first one.
Yeah, first one, seen that.
Yeah,
it surprised me.
Yeah.
It wasn't a movie I was like looking to go see. But you had invited me, so I was like, why not? And I went into it kind of not really expecting too much. I mean, I'd seen the first one, but also the first one came out years ago when I was much younger.
Yeah.
And also the movie, technically, I didn't think would relate to me as much, but it actually did. I'm not going to spoil anything. Yeah. But I walked out of that film with a lot of respect to the animators and the director of the film to actually like improve upon what the first movie did, but by like a lot.
Yeah. I would say that it's a very observant movie of like human emotions. And that's what the first movie did very well. And while I think the first movie is probably a little bit better, in my opinion, than the second, I do think Inside Out 2 had the advantage of being able to build off of what it had started. And it tells like a new story in the life of like Riley, the main character. But yeah, it's a very, observant is the word that I go back to. And it's remarkable like how well executed those ideas and concepts are. So yeah.
And just for reference for those that are listening, so today is September 28th. So the numbers that we're mentioning, that's kind of the date that we're getting them from right now.
Yeah. So the global, I should clarify, the global numbers year to date, Inside Out 2 is number one at 1.6 billion. The summer season technically stopped September 2nd. So the numbers we have for the summer specifically, we're going by like the domestic numbers, like US and Canada. And yeah, that has $650 million domestically as of September 2nd. So it's probably eclipsed that. So some of these numbers are going to be a little bit off if you look at like today's accruement of money.
Well, what's really interesting for the domestic summer numbers, though, is not too far behind it, at least as of September 2nd, is Deadpool and Wolverine at $603 million. For a movie that's rated R to only be about $47 million off of something like Inside Out 2, I think, is pretty crazy.
Yeah, and that's just the cutoff at September 2nd, too. So it's probably actually pretty much, it's closer. And worldwide, it's, $1.3 billion. That's, incredible success that the MCU absolutely needed. And it didn't even really feel like an MCU movie. When I watched it, it felt like more in the... Like
felt more like a Fox.
The X-Men kind of universe. But, it's just a Deadpool movie. That's what it's about. And, bringing in Wolverine. That great on-screen chemistry. It was a smash hit. Everybody was going to go watch this movie. So, yeah.
Why do you think... It's just very interesting looking at the top two. Like, Inside Out 2 is very family-driven. And then you have Deadpool and Wolverine, which kind of like, in a way, definitely cuts out a lot of that younger audience. So what do you think was the main thing that made Deadpool and Wolverine so high in that ranking?
I think it was the hunger from Marvel fans from wanting another, at least bare minimum, decent film. Because I know that's what I wanted. I'm someone who's like kind of been really down on Marvel, as I think a lot of people are, who grew up with the MCU movies. The first Iron Man came out when I was 8. And I watched them all the way up, through today. And just really hoping that they could stick a landing and that they would do it with a highly anticipated character returning to the screens, which that being Deadpool and Hugh Jackman as Wolverine.
Yeah.
So I think part of it really is that maybe it could never fail. Like maybe people would review it poorly, but people would still come out to watch it, I think.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that it was an entertaining movie, an entertaining film, now you had people who probably were out on Marvel, had their friends telling them like, hey, you should probably go see this. And that kind of like really like snowballed, I think.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think they just both had really specific audiences that like to show up to the theaters. That's good marketing.
True.
And stuff like that, Sometimes you just got to tip your cap to the studio executives. Yeah, and then the movie that really kicked off the summer season, though, strangely enough, was Bad Boys: Ride or Die. And I don't have like that much to say about the movie itself. It was fine. It was fun. Will Smith and Martin Lawrence have, I think this is like the 4th movie that they've done these characters. So, they're pretty comfortable in them. But yeah, that was a smash hit for what it was, It's number 5 on the summer list specifically. And that really kicked off the summer season. It was a really rough start to the year with the box office. There was Dune 2, and then that was it. Lots of, if we look at the top 10 grossers so far this year, there was a couple good movies, like, or I should say successful movies at the box office. Kung Fu Panda 4 and Godzilla. But there was like flop after flop after flop earlier this year. The biggest loser, I think, was Furiosa, Mad Max Saga. That movie, me and Jason also saw that together. And I mean, it's just like, it's a technical achievement. I mean, George Miller, you know, it's just, it's really builds off of what Mad Max Fury Road did back in 2016, of just like these extremely elaborate productions. You know, how they built these huge rigs and trucks for the movies, and like all of these practical stunts. It's just like stuff you've never seen before. And the fact that it didn't even make the top 10 of the summer, and it was easily like one of the better movies. I mean, I think it's my like second favorite movie of the year that's come out. And yeah, it's kind of a shame that it underperforms so much.
Yeah, it really is up there for me. It's one of those films where I don't think anyone was really asking for it. However, I don't think the fact that nobody's asking for it invalidates the movie existing.
Right.
Yeah.
But I do think part of that's the reason why I don't think a lot of people showed out for it, though. But it definitely adds to the story, particularly Furiosa's character in Mad Max.
Mm-hmm.
And while you can watch Mad Max and be satisfied and not really crave more, I feel like you'll have an even better appreciation for the movie, at least I did, by watching Furiosa. And just kind of watching, it just gives more context to the character. And, you know, to a Morton Joe and kind of that particular area of the wasteland. Mm-hmm. Yeah, just a great movie. It's I hate that it bombed.
And considering some of these movies that beat it out, you're like, that's just really puzzling. Like, there was a movie that was, I think, written and directed by John Krasinski called If, which IF is like imaginary friend, which was a very like okay movie. You know, it was definitely geared towards kids. But just like If, and then Blake Lively's It Ends With Us, like making the top 10 over Mad Max, to me is, it's a shame. You know, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes made it on the list. I think that's not a surprise. A Quiet Place, I mean, that has a lot of fans. And, you know, that's one of the most beloved horror franchises of our generation, right? And Twisters was a big sequel, which Twisters, the story with that actually is it kind of disappointed worldwide. It did a lot domestically, but worldwide it's, I don't know. It had a huge budget, huge marketing budget as well. And that's a lot of money you spend. And so you've got a lot to make up. And if China isn't doing it for you at the box office, you know,
They don't get tornadoes there. So.
maybe not. Anyway.
They don't know that Iowa life.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and also Alien Romulus, I guess the last kind of movie you want to talk about. A horror generational franchise across many generations, sneaking it. It's technically number 12 for the summer season if the cutoff date is at September 2nd. But yeah, Alien is now a top 10 movie, passing Garfield and The Fall Guy. You know, Garfield, I saw that. It's basically unapproachable if you're above the age of 7. But anyway.
Well, what about The Fall Guy, though? That's a movie.
Another movie me and Jason saw together. Yeah, The Fall Guy, that stunt movie, I don't know how. I mean, it did technically get in the top 10, but I think a lot of people would view it as a disappointment. Didn't really do much globally and had a big budget. You know, Ryan Gosling, Emily Blunt. Mm-hmm. I think great charisma together. Mm-hmm.
I loved it.
I don't know how a movie like that doesn't sell, but when your budget gets astronomical, you know, the more you have to make up at the box office.
I was going to say, I think it clearly sold. They just maybe paid too much to make it.
Yeah. But I'm a big fan of David Leitch, the director of that. He also did Bullet Train, which is one of the most underrated movies of the last few years. And anyway.
That's the one with Brad Pitt, right?
Brad Pitt.
Yeah. I saw the trailer for it and I was like, this is wild. Like the way it just goes into it.
I think the marketing for both Bullet Train and The Fall Guy actually do like disservice to what the movies are actually like. Don't get me wrong, it is kind of wild, especially Bullet Train.
Very high energy.
But they're really funny. Like really funny.
Really, yeah. I mean, great performances. Aaron Taylor Johnson and David Tyree Henry and Bullet Train were like, I mean, that might be the funniest comedic duo on screen that I've seen in the last couple of years. I mean, Yeah. Anyway, and the director is a stuntman, so he's the stunt work
Nice.
is going to be really
Nice.
really great. Anyway,
I like that.
yeah, and just before we move on to Interstellar, a few things. We got some movies coming out this year that are worth mentioning. Joker 2, we mentioned earlier, rated R. Just like Deadpool. How big is it going to be? Another rated R $1 billion movie? And Deadpool is actually the number one rated R movie of all time now in the box office, and it did it in like 10 days. I think it surpassed The Passion of the Christ in 10 days.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. So Venom 3, I don't know if there's a lot of passion behind that movie.
I'm high on Venom 3.
Jason's our comic book guy, so
I'm high
he's
on
high on
Venom
it.
3.
Kraven the Hunter, also another superhero movie. He's kind of more like a villain.
I'm low on Kraven the Hunter.
That was supposed to come out last year, but it got delayed by the strikes.
It's just interesting because it just seems Sony's really trying to do something, but it just feels kind of Like, I guess with the whole Spider-Man property rights thing, they're trying to set something up or just build a world, and it doesn't feel quite like they're hitting it.
I think it suffers because it doesn't actually have Spider-Man in it. Because technically they share the rights with Disney. So they're like trying their best to make all these movies around Spider-Man characters without actually being able to use the character, which actually kind of like hinders it a lot because all these characters are dependent on Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And the only reason I like the Venom movies is because they're goofy.
Yeah.
Morbius, kind of goofy, but it was like super bad.
It was actively like horrible.
It was
watching
like
it was made me
the opposite
miserable.
of entertainment.
And then
gosh.
just when you don't think it could get worse, Madam Web comes out. Like genuinely one of the worst movies you'll ever watch.
I will give props to Matt Smith in Morbius just because I really like the actor.
Yeah,
But
it's a disaster. Like I genuinely don't know how they let those movies be so bad. Like the Venom ones are, they're not like horrible, but yeah. Anyway,
Venom is, especially the first one. I actually don't really like the second one, but the first one is like a perfect amount of like goofy and entertaining action.
yeah,
That I can enjoy myself. The second one I actually don't like as much,
yeah,
but
yeah. I mean,
I think Venom 3 looks cool. So
we'll see. I mean, I like Tom Hardy as the Venom, but Michelle Williams' character, I mean, terrible. Like some of the worst like written characters. I don't know. Anyway, some other movies coming out. Gladiator 2 that comes out this fall.
Yeah.
Which had a really good trailer, honestly. I don't know if you've seen it, but
I haven't seen the trailer yet.
doesn't seem like Russell Crowe is going to come back. But I mean, you got Paul Mescal,
I think it'll be
Denzel
fun.
Washington.
I think it'll be fun.
Pedro
It's another one of those movies, kind of like where it's like we don't need a sequel to it, but we're getting one anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it might be one of those moments where they were just very secretly brewing something very nice, and it might be a very nice continuation of that world, because sometimes that is something that I don't see coming, like when a sequel comes out and it comes out and I'm thinking, oh, like they really cared about the material and they continued it well. But
yeah. We'll see. I'm excited about Gladiator 2. I like the trailer. The trailer sold me. We've also got Smile 2. The first Smile was a big hit. Actually, really scary. I mean, me and Jason also saw that
2 years ago.
I kind of half watched it because I was too scared to watch most of it. But I don't know. We'll see if the sequel, the horror sequel, is actually good. I doubt it, but
It's one of those things where it's like the gimmick worked really well in one movie.
yeah.
I don't know how well it's going to work a second time. However, I will watch it.
I mean, if
I'm
you
gonna
put
give it the benefit of the doubt.
if you
I'm gonna
jump
watch
scare a creepy face, you're probably going to get some scares.
That's
So,
different,
yeah.
though.
That's how it is. Moana 2 is coming out. Just saw the trailer for the first time.
Originally
And,
meant to be on Disney Plus, by the way.
I feel like after Wish last year, Disney needs a win here for Moana 2. And Disney's been a lot better in 2024 in terms of movie releases than they were in 2023. So Moana 2 maybe will build off of that. Also, I snuck in here in the notes a movie called Conclave, which is based off of a novel. It's directed by Edward Berger, who did All Quiet on the Western Front a couple years ago. Not the same kind of movie at all, though. It's about like the papacy, and there's like some sort of like murder mystery. I don't know. It looks really interesting.
Is it about the what?
Like it's like the Catholic, like the Pope and the cardinals and bishops, and apparently it's some sort of like mystery. It looks really interesting. So
Conclave.
I just had to sneak that in there. Conclave. Yeah, an award season coming around the corner. December is when the Golden Globes are, but now it's like when all the big movies are coming out, like the awards contenders. So maybe in the next podcast we can talk more about those. But
Yeah.
Some Oscar bait.
yeah. So far, the only movie that has come out really that I think has a legitimate shot at winning Best Picture is Dune Part 2.
It's a solid statement.
And I still don't think it's going to win. Like my brain says, my heart says it will, but my brain's probably like, they're just going to go for the,
Heartfelt something or other.
artistic drama that was made on a $10 million budget. And not that those are bad or not good, but they're genre bias. A sci-fi movie winning Best Picture, I don't think it's like ever happened. I mean, technically Everything Everywhere All at Once was a sci-fi, but not in the sense of like Dune 2,
But it's so much more than a sci-fi, though.
I would classify
Dune
it,
2 or Everything Everywhere?
Dune 2.
Oh, yeah.
I would classify it as a space opera.
Yeah.
You're going the George Lucas route.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Star Wars is not sci-fi; it's a space opera.
I think this is
It
not
is-
related, but Star Wars is more of a fantasy than it's a sci-fi, in my humble opinion. But
Well, Star
I
Wars.
was just quoting George. I think
You
that's
just
what
quoted George.
I think that's what he says. Like he would say it's a space opera if they ask him.
well,
I think
George
it's not an
romantic.
inaccurate description, though.
George Lucas is romantic about sci-fi, so hey, Well, cool. Let's talk about Interstellar now that we're 10 minutes past what we were supposed to be.
Dude.
It's all good. Yeah. So we watched this a couple days ago. We all got to watch it together like last week. And this was a lot of people, I feel like on my TikTok reviews, I get comments, people saying like Interstellar is like one of their favorite movies. And even just when I'm talking to people not on TikTok too, they're like, yeah, Interstellar. So, and this is Jason's favorite movie.
Correct.
And yeah.
Yeah. So directed by Christopher Nolan, starring Matthew McConaughey, and then Anne Hathaway as well. I saw this movie for the first time either December 2014 or January 2015. I don't know. It was winter break. I saw it in theaters with some friends, and I remember walking out of that movie feeling different. I don't mean to exaggerate, I guess, but just all of a sudden I was like, this isn't just a thing to do. You go to the movies, you hang out, or you put something on the TV and you lounge around. I was like, wow, there's actually like thought behind what they're showing me. Right?
Yeah.
Which kind of led me down this huge rabbit hole of just watching film. So Interstellar, kind of like a brief overview, Earth. I'm sure most of you know what it's about, but Earth is like dying. All of our natural resources, particularly our food, is suffering from some sort of blight. They don't really go into it. But basically all the plants are dying.
Yeah.
And along with that, the atmosphere is like changing to basically where it become like unbreathable. And Cooper, the main character played by Matthew McConaughey, kind of is led to NASA, who's kind of gone underground since the start of like all the world going terribly.
It's because it looked bad for the government to fund NASA instead of like food production and stuff.
Yeah.
And they're like, Cooper, you know how to fly planes and spaceships, I guess. We need you to lead this last mission and find us a habitable planet through a wormhole. Sounds a little ridiculous now that I'm like just simplifying it, because it actually kind of is. But the way Christopher Nolan takes these kind of like really sci-fi and out there ideas and turns it into a movie that is like really serious. It's just something else. And that's kind of like what we see. They go on that classic space adventure. So it doesn't feel like that. Like that's what they're doing though. They're just like, let's go into a wormhole and find a habitable planet. But it doesn't feel like that when you're watching it. It doesn't feel so trivialized.
Yeah.
And there's just so many emotional moments in the movie that are like really beautiful.
Yeah.
It's one of the only movies that kind of bring water to my eyes. Particularly the scenes with Coop watching these like videos that his family sends up to him. And he's just kind of forced to watch them grow.
Yeah.
Well, he's not there. I think it hurts. Like, I'm not a father, but even when I was 14, seeing that, I was like, I felt that. They were able to convey that emotion to me.
Yeah.
So all of that comes together into like this really like awesome movie. And I get why it's like a lot of people's favorites. I guess most folks saw it and probably had the same thought as I did, especially people my age who were like just going to see a movie and saw that and they had it like, they saw this art.
Yeah.
I'm being pretentious, but
I mean, it is art for real.
yeah. And then you the score too. Oh my gosh.
Hans Zimmer, right? Zimmer?
Yeah. Hans Zimmer. The score is so great. I think the first time you notice it is at the very beginning of the movie. There's that drone that's kind of falling out of the sky, and you have the music crescendoing as they're chasing it, and as they're about to like drive into a lake. That's when you're like, they weren't playing around with the score here.
Yeah.
And the score probably actually peaks, in the scene where they're going into the wormhole, which is like another like. The visuals are like off the charts. This is like we're watching it in 2024. Yeah. I don't know about you, but it looked like they could have taken a camera into space.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you guys felt the same way.
The wormhole scene definitely was really incredible. Like it distorted your perceptions of reality, like of traveling through something like a point A to point B. Travel doesn't really work like that, and how Christopher Nolan was able to basically science it up and like, what would this actually look like, and then bring it to screen. Yeah, I mean, it was incredible.
Yeah, the way it all came across, like what you were saying earlier about how they're going into space, yet it somehow feels grounded in a way. Like, I definitely understand that, because I'm just picturing that their space travel as opposed to when, the Avengers go into space for the first time in Endgame. And like, there's a very different feeling. But this was done in such a way where it's still fictitious in a way, but like...
I'm dying.
Sorry. Or not excuse you. What do you say when someone's coughing? Bless you or...
Bless you.
I'm not gonna drink water during our podcast anymore.
What are you supposed to say when someone coughs? Like, because bless
okay?
you sounds, I guess, are you okay is what I should have said.
Yeah.
I say bless you.
You can bless me. I want to be blessed. So
sorry, Wesley. I should have asked how you were.
Anyway, sorry.
Anyways, no, it's all good, man. So, yeah, it was really cool just the way they delivered it. Made it feel grounded, yet still kind of fictitious and imaginative in a way.
Yeah.
But the whole time, like, I was in it, like, really just not taken away from any of the effects or the storylines. Like, it all felt very thought out, kind of going back to what you were talking about too when you first saw it, Jason. Like, you realized how much thought was put into it, and yeah, it definitely shows.
Yeah. I think of all of Christopher Nolan's movies, this probably is like the most emotional one, I would say. I haven't seen every single one, so like I haven't seen The Prestige, or I haven't seen like some of his earlier stuff. But I will say that of the ones I have seen, even the movies that I think are technically better than Interstellar, I still think, yeah, this is the most emotional one. I think Christopher Nolan's style of filmmaking, it's very fast paced, like editing. It's very much about, I mean, he's got these like themes that he goes with, and he's got like interesting characters and interesting plot lines. Like I'm thinking of like The Dark Knight, for instance, where it's very intriguing. Like the concepts are like draw the viewer in, but they're not necessarily like emotional in the sense of like, oh, I feel like an attachment to what the characters are going through, like that empathy. It's typically hard to empathize with a lot of characters in his movies, but in this one, I feel like what he nails is the use of like perspective. Like I feel like this is very much like Matthew McConaughey's, like a Cooper's movie. And the reason why I can say that is because, or like some of the things that clued me into that were the relationships that are highlighted with his like daughter versus his son. And like, I think the movie spends a lot more time with his daughter because that was the relationship that was like the most complicated. The one with his son was pretty straightforward, like traditional, like father-son relationship. But the movie really chose to highlight the more emotional, complex part there. And yeah, I think just like what you said, in the perspective of the scene, like you mentioned, where he's like viewing the video of like how his kids had grown up, and like to witness all of that all at once, like it's almost like a devastating, you know. I think that a lot of this movie, like one of the main, like the tone of the movie to me felt, or I guess the mood would be the technical term, it was very like devastating. It was tragic, you know, like what's happened to the world, what's happened to these characters specifically, knowing like what they're doing isn't necessarily for themselves, but it's for like the future of humanity and the great sacrifice that everyone has to endure. And from Matthew McConaughey's perspective, it only happens like within a couple months, right? From the time they leave the Earth to, I forget the exact timeline, but it's a short period of time between when that he's actually like leaves Earth and then views that video of his kids growing up. It's not that long of a time. Like it doesn't look like he's aged at all. Yeah. So for him to basically all that happen, like that's a lot to take in. It's devastating. And nothing about this movie gives you a whole lot of hope in terms of like the events happening. The hope really comes from like the emotions of the character. And I don't think any other Christopher Nolan movie does that. Maybe, I mean, Oppenheimer kind of is emotional, but even then, I don't think it explores like, the emotional side of like the heart of people.
It wasn't a
like Interstellar
personal movie. I get Oppenheimer's about specifically Oppenheimer himself.
Yeah.
But the emotion in that movie is more like grand or it's hard to describe, but I guess it's a relational emotion.
Yeah.
That you get a lot more from Interstellar. The relationships that people have and how it kind of affects their decision making, because a good foil to Cooper, Matthew McConaughey's character, is Matt Damon, or Dr. Mann, someone who has no family. They bring it up multiple times in the movie how he has no family. That I think like 3 times they mention it to kind of emphasize.
No attachments, yeah.
And you can see how that changed his decision making. They both Cooper and Dr. Mann want the same thing, which is to save humanity, save the future of humans. However, they're both have different circumstances, which leads Matt Damon's character to lie about what he's found on his planet, so that he could be, rescued. And also it leads him to killing 2 people, or attempting to kill 2 people. He kills
one.
I believe it's Romilly.
Yeah.
Tries to kill another. Yeah.
And then tries to kill Cooper.
Yeah.
Spoiler.
Yeah,
This
we
is a
can.
spoiler talk.
Yeah, we can totally talk about spoilers.
It's a
for
10-year-old
sure.
movie.
Yeah.
And it's been out for 10 years. Everyone's seen Interstellar.
But yeah, I think Dr. Mann's character is really important to that kind of like story. It's just being, the classic, there's a foil, there's an opposite. Testing, I guess, the main character's morals by showing you kind of what he could be. If he's not a father, if he has no one back home that he's trying to save.
Yeah.
Because all Dr. Mann cares about is himself and the general idea of saving humanity, quote unquote. But he doesn't care about what happens to everyone that's alive on Earth. It's more so just the general, like, can we repopulate a planet? But he wants to be there to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was not expecting that at all. Like when we first found out that Matthew McConaughey's character, like when we first found out that his professor who was inviting him in back to NASA, like when we found out that he was lying about a lot of things, that one was just like something I was not expecting. And then for it to trickle down into Matt Damon's character, Dr. Mann, and like his motivations was really not expected. Yeah. And man, they did it in such a way where it did not make me like Matt Damon. His character is like, they just delivered it in such a real and believable way.
Yeah.
To where, it was just, they delivered it good.
Yeah, sometimes you just got to say, man, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the plot twist at the end, with Matt Damon's character, that also, I think, added to that, like that desperation and the devastation of the movie. Of like, these guys are like trying to do what's best for humanity, but even then, the people that are supposed to save us can't even agree on like how to do it, and and I would say if I had to have any criticisms of the movie, it probably would revolve around like part of that execution of how that all went down. And, Jason, I know you've thought about this movie a lot, and maybe you can put some of these at ease for me, but I think I think Christopher Nolan couldn't resist the urge to like get like an action scene in there. It felt out of place, like Matt Damon and Matthew McConaughey like getting in a fist fight on a frozen planet. I was just like, do we really need to do this? Like,
So,
and I don't know. It was like this imaginative sci-fi exploration into all these different planets. I think there was plenty enough risk and danger on like these places that we're visiting, right? Like the big waves from the first planet they went to, right? People were dying. Even the risk of like time, wasting time could be a matter of like years and decades. So when we get to this planet, I feel like this whole plot twist is just kind of like forced at you. And like, I like the idea of having that villain. I don't think it was executed perfectly. I think it was executed well, but yeah, I mean, I think there are just a few things that I'm like, why do we figure this out just like all of a sudden when Michael Caine is dying on his bed or whatever? I felt like that wasn't really set up. I mean, it was set up like a little bit with, oh, you haven't solved this equation yet. I feel like you could have done it. I think Jessica Chastain says that at some point.
Yeah.
But other than that, and that might raise a little suspicion, then out of nowhere, it turns from like a exploration based kind of stakes and saving humanity to like just petty like betrayal. And I felt like that aspect of the movie was a little bit burdensome for me. I don't know how you guys think.
I see what you're saying with like Professor Brand, like on his deathbed revealing that he lied about the equation, that it could, like, he already technically solved it in the sense that it could never be solved. But for Matt Damon's character, and part of it's like it's a rewatch for me. So to me, I guess the signs are a little bit more telling. But throughout the movie, they always talk about like he's supposed to be the best of us. He convinced all these people. I think it's like, what is it, like 14 other scientists to go out into this wormhole. He has no attachments. So they're kind of like setting him up to actually be like someone who might turn on them. But I guess it's really subtle. But I see that upon a rewatch, right? And then when, there's a point just before kind of like the betrayal where Cooper and Dr. Brand and Hathaway's character hear from Murph, Jessica Chastain's character, that, it's all a ruse, that Professor Brand had lied. They kind of have a discussion, and Cooper asks to let him leave. And so because he has to leave, he wants to go ahead and set up the base camp on Dr. Mann's planet. And when he's talking to Dr. Mann, you can see Dr. Mann's making all kinds of excuses to explore the planet. Because that's what Coop was like, let's go down there, let's explore. He's like, oh, there's a storm. Well, Coop said, I'd rather risk it. And then Dr. Mann's like, fine, it'll blow over in a second. You only get that, I guess, if you're rewatching, right? But you could tell he doesn't want to do that because then it'll be revealed that he's been lying about what's on his planet.
Yeah.
And so then, since he has to keep his kind of narrative going, they're forced to go on that hike. So he just comes, he's got to get his hands dirty. And I think that's appropriate. I think for someone who's trying to, quote unquote, preserve human life, I think it's interesting to show that they're actually willing to take it too, in the name of their philosophy.
Yeah.
Because I think it shows that they're actually quite hypocritical. He's actually not killing these folks because he wants to preserve human life. He's killing them because he doesn't want to die.
Yeah.
If he were honest, he would have never called them down there in the first place and sent the signal originally. So I find it, to me, I think it's really important that he's trying to kill and does kill someone else with an explosion. But that he's trying to kill Cooper here. Because I think it really drives home kind of the hypocrisy of what his character's about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess when I was watching it, because it was the first time I had seen it, we'll also get your thoughts on this, Asher, too. Yeah, I felt like it was just a little jarring with like the direction the movie was going. But I mean, I can see like what you're saying though. Like I can see the thought process behind it for sure.
With that, if there is a way you could maybe tweak the story or like adjust something to make it more fitting to maybe what you were thinking of, like what would you think you would
Well, I'm not a writer, so I can talk a big game, but actually providing solutions, that's somebody else's job, right? I would say just lean in more of the, like, how can we make this, like, what is the more like naturalistic threat rather than the human threat, because to me, that's what the movie was like consistently staying on that track, for most of the movie, like discovering all of this stuff happening in space naturally. I know, like, technically, yes, there was like wormholes are not like naturally occurring, so somebody had to create it, right? But that didn't feel like a human thing. That felt like an extremely like above humanity type thing. So for me, I would have liked to have seen like they get to Dr. Mann's planet and it would have been more, like, how can we make this planet habitable? Like exploring that route and like, what are the dangers from it?
Yeah.
Rather than like, let's just kind of, I don't know. To me, it just kind of seems like they threw this whole betrayal plot at us in the second or third act. But again, like what Jason was saying, I think helped explain a lot of like the reasoning behind it. And I think it was, like I said earlier, I think it was executed well, but like, yeah, I guess I just don't feel like super at ease with it when I think about it, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I'll take more reflection and maybe another rewatch. So
Yeah, I definitely see both sides of that, like kind of where you're coming from, Wesley, and like your explanations, Jason. I do understand if they were trying to kind of hint at the fact that when people are put, not people, but when humanity is put in a very survival situation, that can, kind of unearth some selfish desires and selfish ambitions for a few people who might be in on something together, knowing that they're going to be out of this survival situation alive. And so I think thinking of that as maybe a motivation as part of the reasoning for, Dr. Mann's betrayal and just the cover up for Professor Brand, like I can see how that can be very tied together. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure, man. Yeah, that's good. And Asher, yeah. So what are some things like in the movie that really stuck out to you? And whether it's storytelling or the filmmaking aspects.
So one thing that I'm still thinking about is just that shot where Cooper Romley and Anne Hathaway's character, Brand, she's also a Brand.
Yeah.
So, because she's Professor Brand's daughter, for those of you who don't know. But when they're all flying to Dr. Mann's planet, and what I thought was them flying through clouds, they were clouds, but it was like frozen clouds. And then when they hit the edge of a cloud and it chipped off like ice, I was like, whoa. Like, it wasn't a huge part of the story, but it was just a very subtle thing that they did for the world that they built. I thought that was very cool and like just something very imaginative. Like, they didn't really need to do that. Like, they could have found out already that it was a frozen planet, but it was just like a very nice subtle touch of spice. They
could have just had the lander just land on the planet and have a quick edit there, but they chose to like show you like entering this world. Like literally, and with the details around it.
And even the way they shot it, I don't know if you guys were paying attention, but the way they were moving the camera as they were following the ship flying into that planet was it wasn't super rough. Like, the camera movement was smooth, but the camera movement had this sort of like movement to where it was almost being operated by someone on like a remote. Kind of like how you'd maybe move a camera on a drone or something. Like, it felt very drone based the way they shot it. And I wonder if they did that on purpose to make it feel more grounded in a sense, instead of a very smooth, like swooping camera shot like you would see in maybe another movie. But that was something too that I noticed was very interesting about that. Just one little scene.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was funny how like collectively when we were watching it, we were all pretty much said like, "Oh, frozen cloud," and then Matthew McConaughey says "frozen cloud" like right after that. Like, did he actually need to say that? Probably not.
I thought about that too. I was like, I don't know if he needed to say "frozen cloud."
And they did the same thing in like Inception, where he's like paradox, like after you see a paradox that they just described for like an entire scene, and you're like, okay, did he really need to say that? But I don't know. Christopher Nolan just wants to, I guess.
I mean,
that's
if
like,
you were flying and you hit a frozen cloud, wouldn't you be like, frozen cloud?
Yeah, I guess so.
True.
Yeah,
because that is something they've never done before. Hit a frozen cloud.
Overuse of exposition, 1 out of 10 movie. No, I'm just kidding.
On that note, I do think they did an excellent job of making the few planets we see feel like definitely not Earth.
Yeah. And a lot of that I think goes back with like some of the, like what Asher was talking about, the filmmaking techniques, like the technical elements of the movie are, some of the best sci-fi you'll ever see. Like, there's 2001 A Space Odyssey and there's like Interstellar. I mean, pretty much that's it, right? Like, in terms of like the top of the game in the sci-fi genre, and maybe now Dune as well. But Dune feels very different.
Space opera.
Right. Dune feels very different because it feels like a desert movie, right? More so than a sci-fi, and in my opinion. I mean, it feels more like almost like a tribal, like what's the word I'm looking for? Like hokey religion,
Yeah.
like Han Solo said, it's like a hokey religion desert movie.
Yeah.
But technically it's sci-fi. Anyway, yeah. So Interstellar, like one of the things that sticks out in any Christopher Nolan movie is like cinematography, right? Visual effects, which nowadays he's like, I don't like visual or computer-based visual effects, but this is very much computer-based visual effects of this movie. A lot of it is, I should say. It actually won the Academy Award for Best Visual Effects.
I think.
But
Nice.
yeah, the cinematography, sorry to interrupt, Jason, but like, particularly when the camera, he does this thing where he mounts the camera like on the outside of the spaceship. I don't know if you guys noticed that.
Yeah.
And it's really evident in the docking sequence, like at the end where they're trying to like spin it and line it up, which is one of the coolest scenes you'll ever watch, by the way. But like just how he maps that out with like the stars and the lighting, like the sun, and how it just looks and feels like space. And even when they're explosions are happening, like you can't hear them, right? Because like sound waves can't travel without oxygen, and there's oxygen in space. So just little details like that add to like the groundedness of the movie we've talked about. Just the lighting and composition of these shots. It's just so good to look at, and yeah, anyway.
Well, I was just going to say that particularly a lot of the shots with the ship, they were real ships that he built.
Yeah. I think a lot of them were, yeah.
Like, if you look at some of the, like, behind the scenes things, they have the ship on, like, it almost looks like a ride, where it's on a little thing that moves up and down and side to side.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of like a rig.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That I think really benefits the way the movie looks.
Mm-hmm.
Not only, they're not simulating, they're actually shaking the ship. Because I feel like you get that a lot with a lot of those, like when you mentioned with the camera being mounted to the ship. You can see the panels vibrating.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure they got that. They literally just vibrated the whole rig to get those shots.
And the other cool thing is that they had different sizes. So something that is common is the use of model work and scaling them.
Yeah.
So for stuff that you might see the whole ship and even the docking bay, like if you see all that together, that's most likely a shortened scale, like a model of it, as
like
opposed to
like
the one.
miniature.
Yeah. So like as opposed to the model that they're sitting in or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm looking at one picture right now on Google Images, and like the docking bay with the ship is, I would say, maybe 4 to 5 people in diameter.
Yeah.
Or is diameter all the way across, or is diameter half?
Radius is half diameter.
Okay, yeah. So diameter, it's like 5 people tall in a sense.
Yeah.
So it's cool the way they, use miniatures and different scales and, real models to convey whatever shot needs to be done.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely like worthy of all the praise you can give it on a technical level. And yeah, I mean, everything, sound design, visual effects, cinematography, all these things. I mean, just an exceptionally directed movie in the aesthetic sense, and also like incredibly emotional, like we were talking about earlier, the most emotional, in my opinion, of any movie. And yeah, just to kind of go over like critic and like audience reactions traditionally of this movie. Like I'm looking at Metacritic, which is my personal favorite like critic score out there. Rotten Tomatoes, I hate it, by the way. Rotten Tomatoes is the most misleading thing ever. 100% in Rotten Tomatoes could still mean it's like a 3 out of 5 movie.
Yeah.
The way they do it. So anyway, it's actually one of the top rated movies of all time on IMDb, like the fan vote.
Yeah.
Metacritic has it at a 74, which is like a good score. It's not like great, but it's actually the number 19 movie all time on IMDb fan vote.
Wow.
19. That's really high.
Yeah. Is there anything else that's sci-fi related that's
That
higher than
high?
it,
Yeah,
or even
so
around it?
at 16 is The Matrix, which I think
Okay.
is a little bit overrated, but in my opinion.
I like Matrix.
I like it, but I don't think it's like the 16th best movie
I don't
of all
think it's
time.
better than Interstellar.
Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back is at 15.
Oh, okay.
Inception's at 14.
Yeah.
And
Empire Strikes Back. That's understandable.
The Dark Knight's at 3, so third all time. So
And
yeah,
this is overall, like all genres?
yeah, this is just any movie ever.
Oh, wow.
But only on Metacritic.
This is on IMDb.
Oh, IMDb.
Metacritic, I don't know. I don't
the
know if
fan
they.
one.
And this is just like if you create an account on IMDb for free and like rate it.
Yeah.
Like that's now Metacritic is like an aggregate of critical reviews from the internet, essentially.
Right.
So I think it's the most accurate predictor if you know what you're looking at. Because if a divisive movie might be like a 58, but there could be a lot of like people giving it 100 out of 100. And this actually does have a lot of hundreds, and it's got a 25. So this movie, in a sense, I think was a little divisive. Critically at least, but I think a common criticism that critics will pose against just Christopher Nolan in general is, well, one, he does a lot of genre films, which sci-fi, fantasy, comic book, and those generally are, it's unfair, but a lot of critics just don't prefer those genres, so they don't think they're as serious unless it's like 2001: A Space Odyssey for whatever reason. I think that's one aspect, but I would also say like Christopher Nolan in general, a lot of people will say like, oh, he's kind of cheesy with his themes in his movies and overly philosophical, which I disagree a lot with that. But I mean, I think in Interstellar it is, I mean, you could view it as a little cheesy, like love transcends all time. But at least it was like set up and brought to completion. Like as cheesy as it was still like relevant to the movie. But I don't know. So that's kind of like the naysayers Metacritic. But yeah, I mean, for me personally, like this is an easy, like 9 out of 10 movie, easy.
I guess we should probably talk about like the ending. I think if anyone has any issues with the movie, it might be the ending.
Yeah, we haven't even talked about the ending, which is crazy. Yeah, what do you think about the ending, guys?
I think I like it a lot,
You like the ending?
but I understand why people have problems with it.
Yeah. I think it's just
Yeah.
confusing, but
Like, from what part? Like, when are you considering the ending to start?
I would say when he goes into the black hole, like starts the end of the movie.
Okay. I thought it was fun. Like, so if we're going all the way to the very end where Cooper's going back out to find Anne Hathaway's brand, that I really liked, because in a way their relationship subtly built up, which was kind of cool because there are a lot of moments in the movie where they are kind of button heads a little bit. And in a way their relationship just subtly built up over time. And I like how there's this connection that they still have. And, Cooper comes back to a world where his daughter is like tens of years older than him already. And she has family and she's on, her hospital bed. So what is he going to do now? His daughter even released him. She's like, you don't have to stay anymore. I have my family. And they had a sweet reunion, but then, he's got still this passion in him to do something that's purposeful. So I thought it was cool that he's going back out to one, continue this search of, habitable planets for, the rest of humanity, even though they already kind of continued to progress. Like, he came back to a station that wasn't around when he left. And so like they made advancements, but the fact that Anne Hathaway's character is still out there and has potentially found a habitable planet, that was really cool. Like, I liked how that was how they ended it in a way.
Yeah.
I love the entirety of the ending sequence from the moment he gets to the black hole to when he's in that.
The Tesseract, I think, is what they call it. Right?
Yeah, they describe it as time expressed in a 3-dimensional space. This is what they say in the movie. All the way up into the stuff you mentioned. I really enjoy that part. I get why, particularly the part in the quote-unquote Tesseract, why some folks are like turned off by it, because it's kind of like, it is kind of out of left field a little bit. I think it's well within what the movie has already set up.
Yeah, I agree.
But what I love about it, now see, I'm big on time travel stuff. All that sort of stuff tickles my brain.
Just tickles.
Just
Just
thinking of
tickles
that
it.
scene in Avengers Endgame where they're like, that's not how time travel works.
Avengers Endgame unironically does the opposite of tickling my brain.
So you mean Back to the Future is a bunch of BS? That was hilarious, bro.
But when he's there and it just shows that he is the one who led himself to where he's at. Stuff like that I find really entertaining.
Yeah.
And I think it's really, to me, it's just the rule of cool. It's cool that he's the reason that he found NASA, that he went out into space and through the wormhole, and then ended up in that Tesseract room, giving his daughter the information that they gathered from the wormhole, which solves Professor Brand's equation, previously thought unsolvable, which saves the humans on Earth. I think that's great.
Yeah.
I think the idea of future humans being able to do certain things like that is also like really fun. It's a fun idea. I'm glad that they don't explore it much, and I'm glad that they don't explain it, because then I think you cross into like true like campy sci-fi stuff.
Yeah.
But this movie avoids it, I think rightfully so. Whereas I feel like some people might be wanting that explanation.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely, 17-year-old Wesley, when he first watched it, was like really confused. I had no idea what was going on. And then when I was watching it when I was 27, I was like, I'm a slightly less confused because I understood the plot a little better. But yeah, like you said, I don't think the point is to like handhold you, Like I was asking you guys a bunch of questions like, well, why did they do all this in the first place if we were just going to do it anyway? It was just like confusing to me. But at the same time, like I think it, like you said, it was well within the like realistic assumptions that the movie like presents to you throughout, So I think it like in a weird way made sense for the story to like do something really off the wall like that. And yeah, like the rule of cool, absolutely. Like this is crazy. Him and the TARS, the robot, like how they were actually able to use that to like transmit the data back, right?
Yeah.
And to Jessica Chastain, so she could, figure out how to get people off the planet or whatever. So
the one question I do have though is if all of that was in a way meant to happen, like if all of that was set up by future Cooper, then what are y'all's thoughts about the fact that he still told him in the past to stay? Because that's a big part of like the movie, like the books falling off and like the watch having Morse code on the hands, it writes out stay. And so that is something I was very curious.
The Morse code on the watch.
Oh,
is the
that's
data.
right. That's right. I'm sorry. It's the data.
It's just the books.
Right.
Right, stay.
Sorry. Yeah. You're correct, Jason.
Now,
I'm curious though, like why, like was it ideal for him to stay and it still would work out for humanity in another way, or because that stay situation in the story, I'm still.
So I might be wrong, but in the end of the film, Jessica Chastain's character opens up her notebook where she translated the Morse from the books falling. It says stay. During that part of the film, her boyfriend or Topher Grace's character is like, we gotta go. We need to leave. And she reads stay. I'm assuming, maybe I'm stretching here, but I interpreted that as she's reading stay. It's telling her to stay in the room.
yeah,
Now, it just gets
to kind of flip it around.
It just gets misinterpreted early in the movie where she thinks it means Cooper has to stay. And yes, that's what Cooper's trying to do. He's trying to make himself stay. I think, though, it kind of like turns and it's like, oh, I need to stay here and look.
Mm.
But like I said, it's really small. You just see her open the book. She says, stay. Really softly.
And I think also
And she's over there pondering and thinking, like, what am I supposed to do? And then she grabs the watch and looks at it.
Yeah. And like, I think part of that was initially when he did get into like that Tesseract or whatever you call it, he was like, that was like right before he was trying to
He was like freaking out.
go back to
Yeah.
Earth, right? So I think initially he was like, no, he was trying to tell himself like, stay. But then, yeah, the way Jessica Chastain was able to like actually put it together, she was like, oh wait, I should like stay here and get the data, which I don't know. I think it worked out, like those two intersecting perspectives and storylines, the way it worked, I thought was really effective. But
Yeah.
so yeah, any like final thoughts before we move to the next section? What's your ratings? If you guys like to do movie ratings.
I love to do ratings. Follow me on Letterboxd. I don't remember my username.
So I guess you can't follow him. On Letterboxd.
This movie, 9 out of 10, easy. Don't really have anything to complain about it. If I really did have a nitpick, it's the sound mixing at the very beginning of the movie. Again, referencing the drone scene. They're like talking, but the music's like really loud.
Yeah.
That's a common critique of Christopher Nolan movies. I think it's gotten way better. I think, I watched Oppenheimer recently. It has almost none of those issues, actually.
Yeah.
But that's a nitpick. I don't actually hold it against the movie. I think 9 out of 10. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
I should note I don't read or watch reviews outside of like what friends tell me.
Yeah.
And like generally hearing what people talk about stuff. I don't look at IMDb, Metacritic, or Rotten Tomatoes. I will read Letterboxd reviews of friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I just like, I don't know.
You want to stay kind of detached in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah. For your own thoughts.
Yeah.
I would say, man, it's hard for me to put numbers on movies, to be honest.
You don't have to. Yeah.
Give it
But-
a feeling.
So I will say what I did say after we watched it, because the time we watched it together, that was the first time I had seen it all the way through. And so just given the visuals, the storyline, the character development, all of that, I just kind of like looked at it and was like, this is a beautiful movie. Like there's just something that is beautiful about it. And it even makes me just think about my own life as well. Like I went home just not wanting to go space travel because like I saw my wife and I'm like, I want to be here with you. Like it just, it tapped in really. I know there's a lot of love, so like there's a lot of points on love in the film, but the way that they conveyed it, like it really hit home for me. So yeah, I would say it was a beautiful movie.
Beautiful out of 10. I like it.
Beautiful out of 10.
Yeah. I mean, like I said earlier, probably 9 out of 10. Like just the main detractors for me were like what I mentioned earlier, is not feeling like super at peace with the whole like plot twist with Dr. Mann. And also, I mean, just like with a lot of Christopher Nolan movies, I don't think he always delivers like exposition of the plot well, especially like in that first act, when he gets to NASA. I feel like when he gets there, it's just, here's science. We're just going to talk about science.
Michael Caine's like,
Michael Caine is a plot device in the movie. Like he doesn't have a character.
He's a charming plot device.
Like he's charming. He's got his Cockney accent, Michael Caine. But
I feel like when they did get to NASA, I feel like that's when the movie really did start to pick up though. Because I think everything before that was very much...
no, it's dusty.
It was very much world building and like getting you in there. And then when they get to NASA, like you're on for a different momentum now.
And I do say that I think the worst offender of the Christopher Nolan plot exposition is probably Inception. But that movie for me, like,
You need to watch it again.
I know we're not talking about Inception, but that for me, I don't think that's a masterpiece that a lot of people think it is. But
He needs to watch it again.
anyway,
Tenet's worse.
9 out of 10
Tenet's
for
worse.
Interstellar. Well, cool. We're gonna move through our last section here, and that is our recommendations of what we've been watching. So I think this could be the best part of the podcast. Who knows? So if you're stuck around after like over an hour,
Thank you, first of all.
thank you. And maybe it won't be so long next time. Who knows?
Maybe it'll be longer. Maybe it'll be a 2-hour podcast.
We're just talking about movies when we like to do it.
Yeah, we're flowing.
We're having a good time. So, brief mention of what each host has been watching. That's what my podcast agenda says. So, Asher, we'll start with you.
Oof. Okay, so I'll just mention, I wrote a few down, so I'll just mention 2 that I think would be fun to talk about. So one's a movie, one's a TV show, or it's a docuseries. So the movie is Young Woman in the Sea. And I know I talked about you guys, talked to you about that earlier. Yeah. Okay. So it's with Daisy Ridley. It's a period piece, kind of in, I think, if I'm correct, the 20s or around that time. And it's basically her just becoming a swimmer. And the main goal of the story is she sets out to swim the English Channel, which is, I think,
really big.
Really long. Like, I want to say, don't quote me on this, but I think it's 20 or 25 miles in the movie.
I'll pull it up.
So she sets out to be the first female swimmer to swim that. Mm-hmm. And basically I'm gonna hold there because we might go deeper. So that's Young Woman in the Sea.
Yeah.
The docuseries. Sorry, Wesley, if I started going.
350 miles.
No, yeah.
Oh, the English Channel?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe it was a smaller section that they were swimming.
Oh, no. Okay, sorry. At its widest point, it's 150. I misread.
Okay. They go from like, maybe we can dive into it more, but it was a good chunk of distance that she had to set out to swim. Mm-hmm. And the docuseries is Light and Magic, and it's a documentary about Industrial Light and Magic, which was the visual effects company that George Lucas helped start and found. Well, he basically started it. And they were like behind all of the original Star Wars effects, and like it kind of captures their story from that time period moving forward. So
okay,
yeah,
all right.
I gotta be a little bit more concise, I think, next time.
No, I mean, yeah, I mean, just like this.
Because you wanted a brief.
No, I mean, just the standout elements. Why you would recommend it to somebody? Yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah.
So yeah, I watched The Penguin, which is the spin-off series of The Batman, which I gush about to my friends all the time, and they're like, "That's great, Wesley." But
I also love the Batman.
Jason loves The Batman.
Not as
well.
much as you.
That was actually my favorite movie of 2022, and I saw probably like 50 movies that year. So, anyway, so I was really excited about The Penguin, and I watched it. I was like, I hope this is good, and let me tell you, it's really good. It's a little bit more on the like, it's TVMA, so it's like a little bit like more realistic with what they can do versus like a mainline movie release being PG-13. So it feels more grounded. But what I really like is, I mean, Colin Farrell, unrecognizable as the Penguin. And I think if you watch it, you'll find like a really competently written movie, or show, I should say, episode, with intriguing characters. I mean, everybody in the characters everybody in the movie, dang, I can't talk. Everybody in the episode is like a bad guy, basically. And so at one point you're just like, well, I got to pick who I like the least, or I got to pick like who is the less bad person to root for. But anyway, yeah, just seeing like how the Penguin interacts like with each situation. You never really know if like this is his master plan or if he's just winging it. But yes,
is that pun intended?
Yeah, winging it, haha. So yeah, and I really am excited for the rest of the series. I mean, the movie, The Batman, was, I mean, directed by Matt Reeves, who is one of the best directors I think out there. And I'm really excited for the next Batman movie that comes out in, I think, 2027. They delayed it like 14 times.
I don't think it's 2026, isn't it?
Well, they said 2026, but maybe it's 2027 now. But
the movie's never coming out.
Anyway,
wow.
I'm not going to get into too many details, but The Penguin is high on my recommendations list right now. So
awesome.
What you got, Jason?
I have two things. It's really one thing. So Fargo, the television series, specifically, it's an anthology. So specifically, seasons 1 and 2. I've seen some of the seasons past it. They are not nearly as good as seasons 1 and 2. If you've seen the original movie, the 1996 film by the Coen brothers,
It's great.
I think you'll really enjoy the television series. I'm pretty sure the Coens had a hand in the production, at least of season 1. It is canonical, as far as I'm aware, to the original movie. But it is just, it's almost kind of like a dark comedy. It's funny. It's really funny, even though you're not expecting it to be funny.
Yeah.
Particularly in season 1. But the characters, it's a whole different cast each season, so I'm not going to list people. Mm-hmm. But the characters are really well written. They kind of put them in these very like almost dire situations, except it's situations that they created for themselves. So you don't really feel bad for them, right? But it's just interesting to see how they're going to navigate this. Like, how is this going to like come together or fall apart?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just really, really good. I don't want to spoil things.
Yeah.
I think you should watch it. If you like the original movie, even if you haven't seen the original, if you just want to see a movie about morally dubious people doing morally dubious things.
Why are we watching all of these things about bad people and their lives? And Asher's watching an inspirational story about a woman swimming across the sea.
We're giving you a good palette, a good rounded selection.
A few different hues.
Yes, which is why I think this podcast could be something really special. So I think that's the podcast, boys.
I think that wraps it up for this one.
Asher, can you tell the people that are listening our social media and contact?
I would be happy to. So we are right now on Instagram and YouTube. Instagram is @on the Slate podcast all together. On YouTube, you can also find us on the Slate podcast as well. And if you want to reach out to us, you can reach out to us through our email. That's onslatepod@gmail.com.
Right.
Awesome.
It's pod, not podcast, but it's podcast for YouTube and Instagram.
Correct.
So
correct.
pod for Gmail.
And Wesley, a little birdie told me that you do some TikTok videos for movie reviews. Is that right?
I do.
Can people follow you there as well?
Plug.
A little personal plug?
Yeah, it's not the fake Wesley Warren.
Is that the username?
Yeah.
As opposed to the real
awesome.
Wesley Warren.
Yeah, not the fake Wesley Warren. So that's my TikTok. I don't post all the time, but yeah, it helps me get the brain, like the jumble out of my brain. So anyway, thank you everyone for listening to the On the Slate podcast. I'm Wesley.
I'm Jason.
I'm Asher.
And we will see you in the next one. God bless.